Right now, I want to bring in the panel to discuss further Jillian Melchior, Noelle, Nikpour, and Tom Borelli. Tom, you've been on top of this stuff for years as well.
Right.
You've been pretty adamant about all of it.
Yeah, I think President Trump made a really courageous decision because he was facing a lot of heat. He was facing heat from the G7. He was even facing heat from members of his own family. But yet, you know, he listened, I think, to Scott Pruitt, is one of the real advocates of this deal. At the end of the day, President Trump is the CEO. He looks at the risks, the costs, and the benefits, and clearly was huge costs and very few benefits. Economically, for sure, there was a big negative, but also the environment, there really wasn't a huge environmental benefit. So he made the right decision, a courageous decision, and let everybody else, you know, complain because they're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, the press conference today, the first question, of course, guys, was does President Trump believe in global warming or climate change, Noelle? And I think Scott Pruitt, who, by the way, was masterful. I mean, he handled those guys pretty good, the guys and gals in that press room. But what do you make of the narrative that this is about climate, America hurting the rest of the world in a very selfish move? Noelle, I'll ask you first, and then you can reply.
Well, you know, the way I look at it is, you know, Donald Trump, he knew he was going to get a lot of flack for doing, you know, making this move, pulling out. But I will tell you,
but flack from people who aren't his constituents.
Right.
They didn't go to the polls for him. They don't vote. They didn't vote for him.
They don't. And economically, it put us at a disadvantage. But what I will tell you is that you have to look at this from their point of view. Liberalism is kind of like a religion. And if you mess with Mother Earth, you've messed with basically a culture or a belief system within the liberals. That's why you see so many governors. You have the governor of Washington, New York, and California coming together to do a coalition to pick up, you know, to help make good where the Paris climate change deal is going on. They're going to form a coalition for this.
President Trump also left open, Jillian, the idea of going back to the negotiating table, saying, hey, you know what, this wasn't about the environment, it was about climate, but it was a bad deal for the American taxpayer.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you brought up social justice a little bit ago. I want to talk about that because I think there's a huge social justice case for not participating in the Paris Climate Conference, Paris Climate Pact, and here's why. So low-income families, families of color, contribute a far larger portion of their take-home pay to electricity bills. To accomplish what we said we'd accomplish under that pact, we would have had to increase electricity bills by about 20 to 30%. That's going to hit those families the hardest. I actually know what that's like. When I first moved to New York City, I was sharing a studio apartment with two girls. We called it the two-bedroom apartment. And actually, the air conditioning became a really big point of contention. I remember in the summer, a bunch of us getting, like, creamed corn frozen and putting it on our backs to cool down because we couldn't afford the electricity bills. And I think when you're asking families to make sacrifices like that and not actually benefiting the environment that much, it's really unfair.
Germany has gone through its own, even perhaps worse than that, and you're right, it's a killer, the idea of electricity making or breaking a household income. Tom, the media went crazy. It wasn't just governors in blue states. Der Spiegel had some pretty good things. There was a couple other German headlines out there that we can't even use on TV. But what do you make, though, the hysteria? The hysteria is really it's more than I thought it would be.
Well, the media has a war with President Trump, and they're really playing to their tune. They're really ratcheting it up.
But when they say to the president, hey, it was the last 2 years are the hottest years in the history of the planet, the polar ice cap is melting, do you care about people in other countries? When they say that the oceans are rising, I mean, what's the pushback on all that stuff?
Well, what the left does, and the media is part of the left, in fact, that's their advocacy arm, you know, they always push the emotional arguments. That's why I think Mr. Pruitt did a great job of staying on message, staying on the economy, staying on jobs. And as Jillian mentioned, those are the people who put President Trump in office, the people in the flyover states, the people who are writing these stories. They're from the West Coast, they're from the East Coast. They don't represent America.